Hello and welcome to Your Need to Know. I'm Elle Spada and my guest is Mayor Catherine Reed, Mayor of Fairfax City. Catherine, welcome and thank you for taking time to share your experiences. You'll share with us your journey to becoming mayor, which is very exciting because you are the first woman mayor of Fairfax City. So congratulations to that. March is Women's History Month, and that is named by the National Women's History Alliance. They are also the group that helped design the Turning Point Suffragist Memorial. So elections, women's voting, all of this is very important to us, and it's important that we recognize women in history as well.
I agree. It's not just women in history, it's women making history. And so to be the first woman mayor of Fairfax City in 2022 is really quite astonishing to think that we're still having firsts like that. A lot of people asked me when I was running for office, they're like, so are you talking about the fact that you're going to be the first woman mayor? And I'm like, absolutely not. Did you see how that worked out for Hillary? So no, I don't talk about it. I talk about bathrooms, sidewalks, the things that my community cares about, because that's what you do as mayor. You take care of your community.
And that's where you've been passionate, because you've done so much work in the past. I know that you helped with legislation that was beneficial for children with autism. You've helped with legislation that was beneficial for women who breastfeed their babies, that they can take their babies with them and breastfeed without any problems in public. So you've been a passionate person about women's issues for a long time.
Well, I think that women tend to run for that reason. When women run for office, it's generally because they see an unmet need, or they have personally been affected by something, and they don't believe that the people in office are answering the needs they see as things affecting themselves, their family, or their communities. And yes, I have worked with so many different organizations over the last decade to try to help get better public policy that impacts women, families, communities, safety. And it's not like I intended to run for mayor. I ran for city council back in 2012 and didn't win, and went on to do this work we're talking about, working with lots of different organizations around the state. But when the opportunity arose to be the second candidate on a ballot that otherwise would have only had one candidate, I stepped up a week before the filing deadline, because free and fair elections means that people have to have one of two candidates to vote for, and there was not another candidate on the ballot. And so I'm like, my community deserves two credible candidates to run for office. So that's why I ran. People are like, why did you run for mayor? And I'm like, because my community deserves a choice. And in running for office, my campaign manager, Laura Stokes, who is a mom with a 9-year-old, became my campaign manager and activated women in my community who'd never been involved in politics before. We call them the Mom Squad. And these were women whose children were in school with Laura's child. We have 2 elementary schools in Fairfax City, 1 middle school and a high school. It's 24,000 people. It's 6.2 square miles, small. But these women, because there were issues, and I will just throw one out, and that is the history curriculum, talking about women's history.
Oh, okay.
Virginia is looking at totally overhauling what our children are taught in public schools about history. Who makes history? Who deserves to be in those textbooks?
Yes, I have an example of that, because there is a high school teenager. She's a senior at Thomas Jefferson. And Priscilla had talked about how she's been able to work with the Fairfax Public County Schools and introduce women into the curriculum for 4th to 6th grade. And we know that children in 4th to 6th graders, they love to learn, and they're very excited about learning in those years. So it's very interesting that she's able to add a text and supply the teachers with resources to be able to include women in history.
You have to advocate. Classes. You have to advocate for that. You mentioned the Turning Point Suffragist Memorial, and the fact that it's located here in Virginia. It's in Occoquan Regional Park. It's a beautiful memorial. It took forever to build, to raise the money, the design. The architect gave his work pro bono. Wonderful man, I know him. Fairfax County gave the land in the park, and the story of the suffragists is not one that's known, not in this region, not in this country. Whenever people come to visit from out of town, we'll take them there, and they have no idea about the history of the suffrage movement. It's because it didn't make the cut. So women's contribution has always been suppressed, denied, it's been invisible.
It's been invisible. I think that's what it is. And I don't even know how intentional that was, but where you are in making history now is repairing it, fixing it, adding it in.
Oh, I think that's so important. In recent history, too, I think about Eileen Fillercorn. They just unveiled Eileen's portrait down in the General Assembly. She is the first woman Speaker of the House in the 400-plus year history of Virginia's legislature. So, always a side note, we have the longest operating legislative body in the Western Hemisphere in Virginia. We were originally the House of Burgesses, and then we became the Virginia General Assembly, but we have been operating for over 400 years. And in all of that time, we had only ever had white men as speakers of the House until Eileen. And she's not only the first woman, she's the first Jewish person to ever be Speaker of the House. So she's a woman who is making history. I mean, she made history, but it's like modern history. And I think people don't look around them and realize that women are making history every day in so many ways.
How does being a woman help you in your role now as mayor of Fairfax City?
I approach things differently. That is true. And I just think I'm a more collaborative person. I have a lot of patience. I am good at listening to people. I think I excel at being kind and compassionate and empathetic, which are not qualities that many people would say politicians excel at.
I was thinking the same. That's not normally what you hear in an ad.
No,
she's empathetic,
right? But when women run for office, it's different. There's this famous quadrant about which sectors you need to be in, and I laugh the whole campaign saying I need to be warm and strong, warm and strong. Am I being warm and strong? Because women need to be warm and strong. Men can be assertive, but when women are assertive, it's not what it's called. Right? Men can be loud. They can take up a lot of space in a room, and people think that's leadership, but not when women do it.
Who inspired you? Who are your women leaders, political leaders, or just women in general who have inspired you for your style of leadership?
I think about Abigail Adams, who wrote, and I think about women in history generally, who through letters and diaries, captured some of what was going on in their homes and their communities in the country. And Abigail Adams' letters to John Adams captures for us that colonial period of time. The diaries of women during the Civil War captured, how much suffering was going on. They didn't have food. They were taking care of wounded soldiers. Soldiers had moved into their house, taken over their property, eaten their livestock. And so the accounts of women recording history is so important. And again, most people are not even acquainted with the writings of women, contemporary writings of women in history. We don't teach it. It's not elevated. It's not widely known. And yet all of these women were making sure that the children were fed and the home front was maintained. And while men are the ones that fill up the pages of our history books and they're the statues in the town square, it was women who kept it all going. And we never talk about that.
It's interesting to try to put a word on that passion that you have. I'm thinking of someone like Eleanor Roosevelt, who was one of my inspirations.
Mine
and she
too.
was quiet. She didn't want to be in front of the crowd, but she was able to sort of overcome that fear that she had, or whatever that was, that introverted nature that she had, because she was passionate. And I think that's important for women to understand the difference between accepting their passion and being able to communicate clearly, and not being afraid of being put down or labeled.
Eleanor Roosevelt so upset women in the South. I'm reading a book right now called The Mothers of Massive Resistance, which is all about white women's role in maintaining white supremacy. So when we talk about women's history, this is probably the point at which you put a footnote and say that not all women did all wonderful things. Women are very powerful. The Lost Cause movement was all about women raising money, building the monuments we're sort of taking down right now. Women did amazing things, but not necessarily to the accolades or the front page headlines or to even the history books, but they did amazing things. But Eleanor Roosevelt, you know, dined with people of color, and this was horrifying to women in the South. The fact that the Roosevelts had people of color in the White House, you know, the fact that they were trying to desegregate the federal workplace, the military. I mean, Eleanor Roosevelt was vilified in the South, and yet she just went on about her business. I mean, she just went on about her business because she had a true north. She knew her moral compass was doing the right thing for the country and for all Americans, all people in this country. And so she quietly and out of her comfort zone marched through her life doing what she thought was the right thing.
And what an influence she's had.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So we have the demographics of Fairfax City, and it certainly includes a lot of women. It includes a lot of different kinds of people. What's a quick rundown on the demographics of Fairfax City?
So it's been really interesting. I was doing an interview of an author for Black History Month and went back to look at the census. And in 1972, the population of Fairfax City was 97% white and 2% black. We've never had more than 5% black population in the city of Fairfax in 61 years. Not more than 5%. But in that time, the number of Asian Americans has grown to 19%, and the number of Hispanic Americans have grown to 17%, and the number of white Americans in the city of Fairfax is now 54%. So yes, it's very diverse. And I mean, those are just kind of the bigger, but there's people from all over the world, because the university is next door, and students from all over the world attend the university. And some of them live in the city of Fairfax.
How do you plan to incorporate the students of George Mason University into downtown Fairfax City?
You know, that is the question everyone's asking, because I am not only the first woman mayor, I'm the first Mason alumna to ever be mayor of Fairfax City. So, you know, that's something we can go into greater detail because I have a lot of ideas.
I think that's wonderful, and I also want to hear about your road to your election. I bet that that's an intriguing story. Thank you so much, Catherine. I'm Elle Spada. This is Your Need to Know, and we will be right back with more from Catherine Reed.
Caitlin, be serious. Now take the oath. Come on. I'm totally taking this seriously. Okay, I'm ready. You may begin. I pledge that I will never meet in person with anyone I first met online without checking with my parent or guardian. And furthermore, if my parent or guardian agrees to the meeting, it will be in a public place and my parent or guardian must come along. Do you pinky swear? I do.
When you teach your kids about internet safety, they'll pass it on. For more information, go to cableclicksmart.org.
Your blood pressure numbers could change your life. Talk to your doctor about creating a plan that works better for you. Start taking the right steps at manageyourbp.org.
Dare to load their minds. Dare to explore. Dare to STEM. Learn more at She Can STEM.
There's more than just books at the library.
There's more than just books at the library.
Excuse me. There's more than just books at the library.
Il y a plus que de livres à la bibliothèque.
Hello. You have a lot of great books here today. You know there's more than just books at the library.
I know.
There's more than just books at the library.
Hello, I'm Elle Spada, and this is Your Need to Know. My guest today is Mayor Catherine Reed. She is the first woman mayor of Fairfax City, and we're going to talk about how she intends to, she's going to help plan bringing the students from George Mason University into Fairfax City on a regular basis. Is that fair to say?
It is fair to say.
Do you feel like there's a large divide in the just few miles between the campus of George Mason and the downtown area of Fairfax City?
There has been. Historically, there has been. There were people in the city who saw themselves as a small town. So you have to remember the campus is 50 years old. Rather, George Mason celebrated its 50th anniversary. And some of the land for the university was given to the university by the city. So the university itself is not within Fairfax City. They're our neighbor, and they are in the county. But some of that land was Fairfax City property. And so back when I attended in 1981, there were like 5 buildings. It was a very small school.
Oh, interesting.
I moved into the first dorm that was ever built on the campus. There was no dormitories prior to October of 1981. So people were commuter students. So they got in their cars and they drove and they parked and they took classes. And there were a lot of students who were full-time professionals who were getting their degree at night. And so in government and politics, which was my degree program, a lot of my classes were from 7 to 10 on a Tuesday or Thursday night because there were students who were trying to get their degree and they needed night classes. But it was a commuter school. And so the city of Fairfax at that time wasn't too bothered by having a small university down at the end of University Drive because people came during the day and they went home at night. And there were like 5 buildings. But then once they built the first dormitory and then they built the second dormitory, and then once it wasn't just a few hundred students living on campus, it was thousands of students living on campus. A lot of people in the city were like, but our small town is not a college town. We like our small town to be the way it's always been.
Is there a stigma to being a college town?
Some people think so.
Okay.
They don't necessarily want young people up at all hours of the night and public drunkenness and all the things that people imagine come with having. They imagine that. It comes with being a college town. There were a lot of people who were like, no, that's not our perception of ourselves. And there were a lot of people truly who didn't feel like they signed up to be a college town. That the university grew up next door long after they had settled on this quaint little suburban sort of tiny little town. And so I think there has been sort of a moat. I joke about there's a moat.
No, that's it's a funny term. There's like a divide.
And it's in our minds more than anything else, but we really have to make an effort to do things that draw students into the city. So for instance, we're doing our first ever Pride event in Fairfax City. That's going to be Saturday, June the 3rd at Old Town Hall. Not a parade this year.
Oh, okay.
Not a parade this year, mainly because I've only been mayor for like 83 days, and so really didn't have time to put together a really huge event. So it's going to be at Old Town Hall on June 3rd, and we are doing that in conjunction with several different organizations on the campus of George Mason. That is a collaboration.
That's a collaboration. That's
right?
a good one.
So I am looking for every opportunity to collaborate with departments, with faculty, and with students on the campus. So the Virginia Climate Center just opened on the campus of George Mason at Fairfax. I will point out that Mason also has a campus in Arlington, and they have a campus in Prince William County.
Yes.
Right? So when we say George Mason, it's a huge school, but there's the Fairfax campus, which is closest to the city. So doing things with the Virginia Climate Center, because we have things we're looking at environmentally as far as sustainability and stewardship in the city that would benefit from connecting with departments and students working on environmental projects.
Talking about connecting, is there a bus that connects?
Absolutely. I'm always talking about the Q bus. The Q bus is free. It was started in 1981. So the first dormitory opened on the campus of Mason, October 25th, 1981. I was there. And the bus was also started in 1981 that connects the city. It goes through the entire city and through neighborhoods to the university and also to the Vienna Metro station. And now it is it's completely free. So we are the first fare-free bus in Northern Virginia. Since we went fare-free 2 years ago, Alexandria's Dash bus has now gone fare-free, and the OmniRide bus in Prince William County, their local routes have now gone fare-free, but Fairfax City did it first.
Wow. Another way to collaborate is that George Mason has such an amazing arts and theater
Absolutely.
venue.
We collaborate with them on Spotlight on the Arts, which happens every April, and that is a collaboration with the university. Some things happen on campus, some things happen in the city. Fall for the Book, which started out is a book festival in the fall. Fall for the Book is a collaboration between the university and the city, and now Fall for the Book is starting to do events all year round. So sometimes those events are on the campus, and sometimes those events are in the city. So it's just looking for all the touch points where we can reach out and figure out ways to collaborate between the university and the city. And the county too. There's actually a committee called FCAB, which was Fairfax County City Advisory Board, I think. And I'm the chair this year.
Oh,
I mean, I got to be mayor, and then Tracy Kendall, who is with the university, goes, Catherine, you're the chair because it's your turn. Apparently, it switches back and forth between the county and the city, so I'm like, oh, so I'm the chair. But actually, Tracy Kendall is wonderful. She works for the university. She does their community outreach. And having a point person with whom we can work is very important. I went to a basketball game where they were honoring Sue Collins, you know, and we just did a panel for Women's History Month in the city on the impact of Title IX. And that involved athletes and the interim athletic director from George Mason University being in the city to talk about the impact of Title IX. So we are constantly looking for ways in which we can collaborate with the university.
I think in your role as the first woman mayor too, you have that passion for collaboration, and you also understand the need of, for instance, the college students to be able to come out into Fairfax City and also have that where they can shop, they can have a new experience outside their college life. I think that's interesting that as a mom, you have that experience.
Definitely, and I think having the Flats at University opened in August, and 400 students immediately, well, I say students, 400 people moved in, most of them are students, but it is not student housing in the sense that it's connected with the university. It is a style of housing where you rent a room, you get a room and a bathroom, and you have a shared common space, like in pods, right? So this meets the needs of young people, whether they're a student or they're just newly graduated, or they're a young professional and they need housing that they can afford. Based on what somebody told me, that there is a preschool teacher who lives in there. Someone told me that there were 2 police officers living in there that are younger, and they just need a small space that they can afford in the city. But 400 people moved in there in August, but many of them are students living in off-campus housing. It's the first time we've had that number of young people in our historic downtown ever in the history of the city. So that helps a lot to have people living in the city. It creates energy, it's feet on the street for our restaurants, you know, for the Old Town Square. It makes a difference. And those students made a difference in my campaign, because the Fairfax Young Democrats, some of them live in the lofts at university, and they encourage people to use same-day registration to vote on election day. And now that's something that's new in Virginia. We've only had same-day registration for 2 years. And so the students, getting the students to register to vote and casting provisional ballots not only made a difference in my election, but it made a difference in electing council member Billy Bates, who is a Mason student. He is now a council member and the youngest council member ever elected to the City of Fairfax City Council.
From the work I've done on college campuses, to get them to register to vote is not a problem, especially in states where when you get your driver's license, then you can sign up. I'm from Florida, to make that clear, but recently moved here to Virginia, and you get your driver's license and then you're registered to vote. In 18, you get your card. But having them vote, that's remarkable, because many of them, I think figures sometimes can be as low, percentages can be as low as 15 to 20% actually vote, even though they're registered, even though they may help out in polling, even though they may, you know, participate to some degree or another in a club on the campus.
There's
so
a
you
gap.
Really did remarkable work.
There's a gap, but having same-day registration means that they cast a provisional ballot. So in Virginia, the night of the election, it's all of the votes that were cast on the machines. Like you went in and you did your Scantron sheet, and you have totals. But the provisional ballots are not counted until like 2 days later. And if the election's on Tuesday, the election is on a Tuesday, the count is certified that Friday. So things can change as they count the provisional ballots. So that's what happened. People who same day registered cast a provisional ballot. So the night of the election, those ballots had not been counted.
And what happened?
Well, it changed the order of who ended up on the city council. Because
Oh my
Billy
word.
Bates was down by 7 votes, and once the provisional ballots were counted, there were 15 votes for Billy Bates, and it mean that he was the number 6 person, because everybody's at large, and it's by the top 6 vote getters are the ones who filled the 6 city council seats. So those provisional ballots made a difference in whether Billy got on the council.
I think that those college students who voted in that way, they won't forget that.
No, they made a difference. They want to make a difference.
Yes, it's almost cliche. Your vote makes a difference, but it really does. And I know the League of Women Voters of Fairfax County does a very good job explaining that to high school students, to college students. So how about your election? Tell us.
Well, I won by 1.9%, which was hardly a landslide, but it was 59% of registered voters, which is the largest voter turnout for municipal elections ever in the history of the city.
Wow.
Normally, municipal elections have always been held in May, and so 20% or less than 20% of voters voted. But the General Assembly voted to move all municipal elections across the state to November. And that increased voter turnout because it was midterm elections. So I was on the ballot with 2 candidates running for Congress. So 59%. So do 20%, 59%, and understand that thousands of people voted for mayor and city council for the first time.
Wow.
Who've never voted for those offices
Those are your
before.
moms you mentioned earlier.
The mom
Those
squad-
are people who were just
Yeah.
already going to the polls, but they don't have time, or they didn't go in May for whatever reason, moms or dads.
May is weird, and Virginia already has elections every year. Most states do not have elections every year. We do.
Yes, that's new to
Right?
me coming from Florida.
You get voter fatigue. It's fatiguing. People feel like they're voting all the time. So having May elections was it was about voter suppression. And not everybody shares that, but here's the truth of it. Only 20% came out in May. And then we put it in November, and almost 60%.
60%.
Okay, so doing it in May meant that we had a lower voter turnout. So all of these factors made the difference in whether or not I became mayor. I don't believe that had our elections been in May, I would have been elected mayor. But they were in November, and I was, and I am.
Well, congratulations for being the first woman mayor of Fairfax City and for making history. And thank you so much for appearing with us today and explaining everything that you have to offer, which is a lot. So you've got that collaboration, your listening experience that you have. I know that you'll make Fairfax City a wonderfful place to live for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you,
I'm Elle
Ellie.
Spada, and this has been Your Need to Know.